your heart, your spiritual heart, receives information from God and from the world and meets in the middle there, and you get to choose which perspective you're going to let rule your life. That which comes from the world or that which comes from God. In fact, they've done these tests about even the physical heart, and they've coined this phrase, the Electrophysiology of Intuition. Which, you think about, that's kind of like saying the science of magic. That's the paradox, the electrophysiology of intuition. And so what they have realized, the conclusions of this study is, intuition can be measured energetically in your body, just like your thought patterns in your brain can be measured.
The heart has its own intrinsic nervous system, which can sense, feel, remember, and process information that's independent from the brain.
We always think of the information input system as being entirely in the brain. But we're now discovering information that the heart receives information first and then relays it to the brain.
So, the idea is this, you got a person, a subject sitting, and they've got electrodes, their brain and their heart, and what they're trying to measure is the communication between the brain and the heart. What we know about the heart now is it actually has neurons. We can clearly understand that which is unseen by that which is seen. That's a principle in understanding the kingdom.
Studies have shown that the heart responds faster than the brain to outside stimulation.
One of the more recent studies we did in our labs was looking at what we ended up titling the Electrophysiology of Intuition. There was some previous research that had been done showing that the body would respond in a way that would predict a future event if the future event was emotionally significant and relevant to the person.
So when I bring up these kinds of studies, what it does is it shows me, from observing this physical thing, I can get a glimpse of how the spiritual side works.
Participants were attached to sensors to record their brainwave activity, heart activity, and heart-brain interactions.
You have a physical heart and you have a spiritual heart. Your spiritual heart is new. If you're born again, you said yes to Jesus, God gave you a new heart, a new inner man, a new core, a new nature, if you will. This is all in Colossians 2, that the old man or the body of sin was removed and he put in you a new heart. So the physical study on the heart is this. Imagine a person sitting there, electrodes, brain, heart, and what they're doing is they, being the scientists, have a computer with a screen in front of this person, and they've assigned a small program to display images on the screen in front of this person, and then they're measuring the electrical response from the heart and the brain to these images.
The person would be sitting in a computer, push a button, and then we're recording physiological data, and 6-8 seconds later, you would be shown a photograph. And then the photograph would be from two opposite ends of the spectrum of emotional arousal.
Participants were shown pictures of car accident victims, snakes attacking, and other disturbing images. On the other end of the spectrum, the pictures included flowers or sunsets. The photographs were randomly assigned for display to the participants.
So they show you an image, your brain and your heart have responses, and they measure it, right? So think about this. I mean, like an EKG you sit down and you put those, have you ever had an EKG? They put those electrodes and they're looking at your heart. That's actually not measuring your heartbeat. That's measuring the electrical impulse coming off of your heart. Your heart is sending out a signal constantly. And your brain also. Your brain is electromagnetic in its thought patterns. So when your brain thinks, there are charges coming off of your brain that can be measured. And to the degree that in any given person, negative thoughts have a consistent pattern, as well as positive thoughts have a consistent pattern. So in other words, when they observe the results of this person looking at these images, they can tell, based on the consistency of your responses, you are having a positive reaction to this image or a negative reaction to this image. And to the degree that that person has emotional attachment to the image determines the intensity of the reaction. Now here's what they found that's fascinating.
What's key here is the computer assigned not only which photograph, but which type of photograph after the data was already recorded. So it was absolutely impossible for the research subject, the experimenter, to have any kind of foreknowledge of what photograph it might be. The computer itself didn't even know.
The results were surprising.
An image would pop up, say, of flowers, or clouds, or a snake, or a car wreck, so they'd get balances right, and they'd do enough to get a data set for these people to determine this is this person's pattern here, the positive or negative, these associations. Now, the thing that's really interesting is this. The heart electrically would respond before the brain did. And then they found that the heart would send signals to the brain and inform how the brain would respond. Like we think with our brains. Like when you encounter anything, your brain responds first and then it affects the rest of your body. First off, most people don't even know that your heart has the capacity to think because it has neurons. That's what neurons do, process and think and remember things. So I keep saying, here's the fascinating part. This is the real fascinating part. The computer randomly selected the images on its own. The scientists weren't even picking which images would be displayed. The computer itself would assign the images. The heart would respond before the image was displayed. Once the image was displayed, then the brain would respond.
The body responded even before the picture was displayed.
What we found was that not only did the body indeed respond prior to the event, the seeing the picture in a way that would predict it, but it was the heart that responded first.
Consistently about 6 to 8 seconds before the image was displayed, the heart would have an electrical response. And it was consistently measurable, positive or negative, and more intense based on the degree of emotion that the subject had associated with the image.
The heart's response was not only faster, but the signal it sent to the brain varied depending on the emotional content of the picture.
Looking at the signals that the heart was sending to the brain, that the heart literally sent a different message to the brain, depending on what the future picture was going to be. Then you saw a brain response. Then you saw the body response, which is where it then became conscious. So the flow of this intuitive information is heart, brain, body, and then you have to have the body response for it to become consciously aware of it.
They call that intuition. We call it gut feeling. It's measurable that you in some way are aware of what's coming at you before you encounter it.
What these experiments reveal is changing our basic understanding of how the human body functions.
It appears as though the heart and brain, later, have access to a field of information not bound by time and space.
This is scientific. This wasn't even a Christian thing that did the study. So then your heart, in the way that it responds to that before it even encounters it, informs your brain. And then your brain affects the rest of your body.
If we're talking kind of quantum holographics or quantum physics, that's old news. We're really starting to have ways now of showing that we really do have an energetic or an electronic system. And that's really primary, that it's really not bound by time and space.
Their conclusion from this is that the flow of data is heart, brain, body. Not brain, body. Heart, brain, body. Now think about what that means spiritually. Where God pours out His love into your heart, Ephesians 3. Where His light is shed abroad in your heart. Your spiritual heart is constantly aware of God. What if in your heart you chose to be aware of God before you encounter anything? Because physically we see your heart's responding to everything that's coming at you before you ever even know it's coming at you. I think in your heart, in your inner man, in that new you that God gave and remade, that new creation reality that you live within, you have a choice. You know, Paul prays that I pray that the eyes of your heart are enlightened. Your heart, you have a choice on what you're going to look at. In your inner man, are you going to look to God or are you going to look to the world? When you face tragedy, when you face loss, when you face difficulty, your heart is seeking data and information, and it's aware, and it's going to tell everything else how to operate. Which one do you want to be responding to first? So think about this, right? Let's say something's coming in your life. God is speaking to you about it before you ever even encounter it. Now, you could avoid the opportunity to walk into whatever it is that he's trying to warn you about, or he's preparing you of how to handle it. You know, you think about 9/11 when the Twin Towers fell, and there's like less than a third of the people that they thought originally calculated were supposed to be in that building, because you just kept hearing so many stories of people saying, well, I just kind of felt like I wanted to stay home, or I felt like I wanted to go in late, I wanted to swing by my kids' school and have breakfast. So many stories came in that thousands and thousands of people weren't there. Why? I think God's speaking to everybody. You know, rains on the just and the unjust. Believers just have the added capacity of the Spirit of the living God within us to help discern His will intimately and personally, rather than just intuition. I like that kind of stuff because it demystifies spiritual understanding. You know, because to try to connect with God spiritually seems so challenging and difficult. And I'm not saying that we can quantify every aspect of God, but He's more relatable than we realize. He's there, He's with us, He's consistent, and He's comforting and speaking to us. And we have a choice on what we're going to do on the inner man to respond to what's going on out here.